Her neighbors called the police, thinking she was just another suspicious black woman. But they had no idea she was the mayor of the city. What happened next will surprise even the most seasoned. But let's start from the very beginning. Layla hurriedly left the city council, where they were discussing new initiatives to improve local infrastructure. The day had been long, but she still had an evening visit home ahead, her private refuge where she could finally rest. Her house was in a neighborhood predominantly inhabited by white people, and although Layla was the mayor of the city, she often faced prejudice and stereotypes. She parked her car, quickly locked the doors, and walked toward the house, noticing several neighbors standing by the fence. Their conversation instantly stopped as she passed by. It was strange, but Layla didn't pay them much attention. It was just another evening. At home, a cozy dinner and silence awaited her. She had just taken off her coat when her phone rang. The local police department's number appeared on the screen. Layla tensed, knowing that a call from the police usually meant trouble. She answered, expecting something minor. "Layla, some of your neighbors are concerned that someone suspicious is on your property. They say you're digging around in your yard and engaging in strange activity. We're sending a patrol. Is everything all right?" A second of silence. Layla felt a knot tighten in her chest. Everything was fine. She was just coming home from work. This was her house, her property. But the officer seemed certain that someone had called them specifically because of her. "It's just me," she replied, trying to stay calm. "No problems." "I understand, but we'll send a unit anyway," the officer replied. Layla closed her eyes. Her neighbors, her friends, had decided to call the police on a woman who had simply returned home. She knew that her skin color alone had placed her in the category of suspicious. But why now? Why at this moment? She remembered how, at a city meeting, one of these very neighbors had discussed how the neighborhood could be better if there were fewer people like that around here. Layla knew her skin color was still an issue in their eyes. She took a deep breath and walked over to the window. When she looked out, she saw a police car pulling up to her house, its siren wailing through the evening air. She stood in the dark, feeling her pulse quicken. Layla knew that tonight, everything could change. "If I don't fight, they'll never see me. But if I do fight, maybe they'll finally recognize me," she thought, feeling her anger and determination swell in her chest. Her hands trembled slightly, but she tried to steady herself. Layla stepped out onto the porch to meet the police, who were already joined by a few neighbors standing by the fence. They were whispering, as if waiting to see what would happen next. The officers got out of the car, paying no attention to her presence. One approached first, not recognizing the woman standing in front of him. "Good evening, ma'am. We received a report of suspicious behavior. What are you doing here?" he asked with a prejudiced curiosity. Layla looked him in the eye, keeping her composure. "I've just come home. This is my house," she replied calmly. The officer looked at her as if she were a criminal, not understanding who she was. The neighbor stood behind her, watching the scene unfold without intervening. "We've received several calls," the officer repeated. "May I ask you to step into the car for questioning?" Layla took a step forward but didn't back down. She knew that if she gave in now, she would lose everything. This wasn't just her home. It was her city, her right to be here, wherever she was. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, looking the officer squarely in the eye. "I'm the mayor of this city. This house is my territory. My neighbors can worry all they want, but I'm not going anywhere." Silence hung in the air. The neighbors began to murmur among themselves, but no one dared to intervene. The officer, slightly stunned, paused for a moment. Then he glanced at the paper in his hand and realized he had made a mistake. "I'm sorry," he muttered. "We thought something was wrong." Layla stood there, feeling their confusion turn into embarrassment. The silence stretched on until the neighbors started talking amongst themselves. Layla realized that this situation was bigger than just her personal struggle. It was about every stereotype and every misunderstanding she had faced throughout her life. But she wasn't backing down. Tonight, she wasn't just the mayor. She was the voice that could finally be heard. And then one of her neighbors, who had been standing in the background, spoke up. "This woman is clearly just trying to hide," he said into the air. When the neighbor spoke those words, Layla felt a chill run down her spine. It wasn't just dissatisfaction, it was an open challenge. She knew that everything was about to escalate. The next move she made would determine how she was perceived. If she gave in, her reputation, and possibly her career, could be at risk. The officer, still not recognizing her, stood at the doorstep while his partner began to inspect her property. The neighbors, who had been discussing her as mayor just moments ago, now lingered in the background, watching her every move. "Tell me, what is this suspicious activity?" Layla asked, trying to regain control of the situation. The officer, who had previously shown little interest, now seemed nervous. He looked at the paper in his hand, then back at her, then at her house, as if searching for something that might justify the call. "We need to make sure everything is all right here," he muttered, trying to justify his actions. "Everything is fine. I'm the mayor of this city. I don't need permission to be at my home," Layla replied coldly, clenching her fists. The silence stretched, but just as Layla felt the situation might escalate, her phone rang again. She picked it up without taking her eyes off the police. "Layla, are you okay? We see the police at your house. Can I help?" It was her assistant, Jeremy. "Yes, they're here," Layla said quietly, "just watching me come home." "Are you safe? What do they want?" he asked, clearly concerned. "Right now, yes, but if anything happens, I'll let you know. They seem to be looking for an excuse to detain me." Layla heard Jeremy speak to someone else briefly, and then return to the call. "We're posting everything to social media. I'm sure it won't go unnoticed. Just be careful." Layla hung up the phone, but her eyes remained fixed on the officers. The neighbors, who had been standing behind her, began whispering nervously to each other. The tension was rising. "We're going to have to take you in," one of the officers said, once again trying to take control of the situation. His voice was firm, but Layla could feel his resolve wavering. "Take me in? For what?" Her voice didn't falter. "I haven't done anything illegal, and you know that. I'm the mayor of this city. Send your people to the city hall, and they'll confirm it." The officer took a step back, but then his colleague approached from the other side, and both began to scrutinize her property with unusual interest. The neighbors continued to whisper among themselves. Layla knew she had to act quickly before everything turned into an uncontrollable disaster. "Look, I can help you," said one of the neighbors, a middle-aged man with graying hair. "Just let us check everything, and we'll sort it out. We don't want any trouble." Layla turned to him. She saw the contempt in his face, and something tightened in her chest. This man wasn't just a neighbor. He was one of those who always expressed the opinion that people like her shouldn't hold important positions in city administration. "This is none of your business. I don't need help from people like you," she said, her words direct, yet they felt like a long overdue response to everything she'd kept silent about for so long. The man frowned in reply, his eyes flashing with disdain. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a manifestation of the hidden racism Layla had encountered her whole life. At that moment, the officers stepped aside, as if giving themselves time to think, and that's when Layla made her move. "If you want to arrest me, do it. But if you don't want this all over the media, I've got a video," she said, pointing to her phone, which she was now starting to record on. Her confidence was now apparent. Seeing this, the officers froze. When the officers finally left, Layla felt some of the tension in her body ease, but it was only temporary relief. She knew this wasn't over. Social media had already begun to react violently to the video she had recorded, and the next thing she heard was a message from her assistant, Jeremy. "Layla, everything's getting out of control. Social media is in a frenzy," he said, his voice tight. "Your neighbors are discussing you. You're at the center of the conversation. This could affect your reputation." Layla gritted her teeth and took a deep breath. "Tell them to keep an eye on it. I'm not backing down," she replied resolutely. "This isn't just an incident. It's a chance to change how people view things. I can't stand by." The neighbor, The same man who had filmed the video and posted it was already seeing his post gain popularity. His comments included words like suspicious activity and the mayor breaks the law. It was clear to Layla that this was a carefully orchestrated plan to undermine her, but she wasn't going to let it work. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the chance to finally confront the lies that had been spread about her and make a stand for her people. Part 4. The next day started with anxiety and rumors. Social media literally exploded after the video, filmed by a neighbor, hit the internet. News headlines were bold and aggressive. The mayor is causing suspicions among neighbors. What is the mayor really up to when not on official duty? Such messages were everywhere, including platforms where no one outside of the city knew anything about her. At that moment, sitting in her office, Layla felt everything boiling inside her. She was scrolling through the news feeds, where each new comment felt like an accusation. Yet she also noticed something important. She wasn't alone. People started supporting her. Comments began appearing from those who saw what really happened, and from those who knew her personal story. "I've always supported Layla," wrote one of the citizens. "She works honestly for the benefit of all of us, and it's disgusting that she's being persecuted over such nonsense." But with each new supportive comment, dozens more appeared, with people continuing to doubt her and find excuses for the actions of the police. Layla exhaled, putting down her phone. The situation was far from simple. She needed to act. She dialed Jeremy, her assistant. "Jeremy, we need to meet. Hold a press conference. Explain what happened. People need to hear my side." Her assistant picked up immediately. "Are you sure this will help? These videos are now being watched by the whole country, and they're trying to frame you. Maybe you should take a step back and wait a little." But Layla had already made her decision. "No, I can't back down. We need to be open and honest," she said firmly. "If I don't speak now and explain myself, I'll never be able to clear this up. It has to be done now." Jeremy agreed. In the end, they began preparing materials for the press conference. All Layla had to do was regain control of the situation. She was going to tell the people that her life, her work, and her goals didn't deserve such dirty accusations.